welcome to the Dynamics 365 Practice Show. This episode, we chat with Matthew Anderson and talk all things pre-sales and client engagement. Matthew is a technical solutions professional in business applications at Microsoft and helps health and life science organizations evaluate business applications. Prior to that, he's held roles at both Hitachi and Zenitech, and also an avid podcaster, speaker, and writer, and even though we don't discuss it, I think a musician. To review the show notes for this episode, please go to nz365guide.com/66. Hi Matthew, welcome to the show.
Hey Mark, pleasure to be here.
Well, it's good to have you on, good to have a fellow podcaster on air. Before we kind of get underway, can you perhaps tell me a bit about life, family, where you come from, where you live, that type of thing?
Yeah, sounds good. So I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's starting to get to that time of year for me right now where I really appreciate all the different types of weather that we get, which includes winter and construction. It is the winter side of it here.
Wow. So does that mean snow?
Yeah, we tend to have a fair bit of snow here, but compared to other places, it feels like it's an awful lot, even what we consider a dusting. So
yeah. No, I haven't had any this year, and this will be my first year of living in a country, because I've only been in London a while, that has a legit winter. And so it's going to be interesting for me. So tell me about family, and have you always lived in Minnesota?
So I've lived in Minnesota most of my life. About 6 months after my wife and I got married about 8 years ago, I got a job opportunity in Salt Lake City, where we moved for about a year and moved back to Minnesota after we realized that wasn't the change that we were going to stick with long term. And yeah, so now we have two kids, an almost 3-year-old and a 6-month-old, and are very, very happy in Minnesota. And my travel schedule, kind of waxes and wanes with the this business that we're in. So when I get to be home, it's a wonderful thing, and when I'm away, I certainly miss them.
Wow. Okay. So when you say travel, kind of, is it just the US you're traveling, or interstate, or does your role kind of take you more further afield?
Yeah, so in previous roles, I did some international, but at this point, I am mostly upper Midwest U.S., but I do kind of break out and cover the entire U.S. to be able to support my team. I'm part of the Health Life Sciences focused business applications team at Microsoft, so I cover anything within the country, but for overall coverage, we have people around the country to be able to do that. So it means sometimes you get pockets of travel, but other times I'm just working from home. Okay,
so you've been in Microsoft 11 months now, around about?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay. So health and life sciences was that? Tell me a bit about kind of what are the type of organizations in that space are business apps customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So the broad categories they fall into are providers. So you think, hospital, nursing organizations, home health, payers. So those would be insurance providers, the Blue Cross Blue Shields of the world and thereabouts, as well as life sciences, including pharma and medical devices. The, locally here in Minnesota, from a med device, Medtronic is a great name as far as, that's concerned. And, I guess locally, even going back to the provider side, places like the Mayo Clinic, being world renowned as far as healthcare providers.
Wow. So have you done anything kind of, and just, reaching back into my career here a bit, have you done anything in the space of where like trials are being conducted? And I was working for one customer for a while where we would spin up a new instance for every time there was a new trial, like a clinical trial. And it was just a massive, awesome user case for Dynamics, CRM at that time. Do you come across that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Both existing customers as well as an upcoming pursuit that I'm working on right now. So, kind of managing the trial, the patients involved, the sites involved in the trial, kind of some of the oversight that comes along with that, as well as kind of documenting what's happened along the way, making sure that trail of what's happened throughout becomes important, to the validation of the overall trial.
Excellent. Tell me about, actually, before we go on to pre-sales and discussing into detail, I'd like to kind of get to know you a bit more and around some of your interests, if you like. So can you tell me maybe about blogging, writing, public speaking, Toastmasters, podcasting, mentoring, and game design?
Oh, that's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful. I just thought I'm going to give you plenty to work with there.
So yeah, as you set up very well for me there, I have an awful lot of interests. A lot of it involves kind of a communication to lots of people through a variety of different channels. So I've always had a passion for public speaking. So that's one that even at a very young age, I was the oddball who would raise their hand and say, yes, I want to do that thing where I'm speaking in front of the large group of people that I don't know or do know. So that, that translated, very well into a conversational tone in the blogging that I would do. So I've done a lot of blogging. Early on it was kind of a personal blog, but it transitioned about a decade ago into professional blogging around, interests around mostly technology and leadership are the areas that most of my stuff falls into, as well as some productivity mixed in there as well. Over time, I, got turned on to the whole podcasting thing. I've loved listening to podcasts for, a decade at this point, but I got into it, I think it was 2014 when I first got to do my first episode as a guest on a podcast. And
wow, that's great. It's a good time ago, it's the early days of podcasting.
Yeah, and for me it was kind of fun, but I tell you what, my early mistake in podcasting was I overproduced the heck out of everything I was doing. I would do 4 or 5 or 6 takes of little clips and try to cut them together almost like I was producing a tight TV show, rather than that nice, good conversational tone that comes with a lot of podcasts and is great for that medium.
Yeah. So just on that, so do you feel that the blogging led into your podcasting as well? Was that a feeder in how you structured anything, or is it really, you see them as really two quite distinct or separate mediums and how they're used for communication?
So I think they're pretty distinct in how I can tailor the way I give the message. I try to keep these things conversational, but if I try to do some of the same things in writing that I do in a conversation like we're having here, Mark, it will become overly verbose and it'll be a little bit more unwieldy as written text. So I try to, it's interesting, my idea generation and the way I will put together an outline for what a podcast episode will cover, for what a blog post will cover, it's a very similar process for how I build that up. But the digital pen to paper versus the, voice to digital audio file is a very different beast for me.
Yeah. So what about other types of writing? What's your experience there?
So, when I was really young, grade school, I did some creative writing, but for the most part, I've stuck to, blogging as far as that's concerned. But the notable exception is I actually do, as things to take me out of my day-to-day job, I'll do creative writing around, I do tabletop role-playing games, and I'm often the game master for role-playing games, which means I'm coming up with kind of the roots and the bones of the story that I'm going to lead people through or have this shared storytelling experience, which means I get to come up with a lot of cool ideas, put them out there for people to play with and see where things go, which is a lot of fun for me.
Hey, that sounds incredible. So is this where the game design comes in?
Well, I tell you, so it certainly helps me there, especially with role-playing games, there's this continuum of how narrative are they versus how kind of crunchy are they, how many, numbers-based rules are involved there. I tend to be more toward the narrative side of things, but it's always important to have some rules, holding you together, so it's not just a complete exercise in, make-believe, if you will. And, for that, the very, fun, one of the things I find very fun about gaming and other types of tabletop gaming is kind of looking at a set of rules, figuring it out, and coming up with a quick idea of how do I think I'm going to win this? What's my best strategy going to be, even if it's the first time I'm playing the game? And it's that kind of curiosity or creativity of figuring that out that led into designing my own tabletop games. So I have like purchasable board games.
No way. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. That's
yeah,
so cool.
I use a print-on-demand service, so I didn't have to go and, print 1,000 copies. And yeah, I've got 3 of them out there. I've got one I'm working on kind of in the background that, it's probably, call it maybe a late 2019 type of release. We'll see how things go.
Okay, so can you talk about the ones that I have no problem plugging this. Can you tell me about your current ones that you've got in market?
Absolutely. So my first offering that I had was called That's Mine, which was a competitive rock, paper, scissors based game for multiple players where somebody is always going to win. There's some betting and bluffing involved in what you're doing, and it's just a very quick, fun game. The second one I released is called Holiday Road, and Holiday Road is the competitive road trip game patterned loosely after the vacation movies with Chevy Chase and company. And you're competing against another player or another team to try to see the best sights along various road trip paths that you can take. And then the third one is called Whistleblower, set in the dystopian future where a corrupt government has left their secrets and clues unguarded within the State House, and you have your opportunity to go in there, get the information, and get out before getting caught.
So just let's back up the one game to the road trip one. Are you saying that, like, people, let's say, going on holiday in separate vehicles, each vehicle could have a game in play that's competing against the other car?
It's not quite that literal in how that
okay,
works.
So it's all on the board.
Yeah, so it's truly a tabletop board game for that. And, so part of the inspiration for that game is I'm not a very good artist as far as drawing is concerned. So I looked for where can I get images that sit in the public domain that are going to be interesting. And national landmarks and national forests and monuments and that kind of thing are a fantastic source there, because there are beautiful, wonderful pieces of artwork that you can get background on the places to be able to bring in. And then, from a design perspective, it's taking that, condensing it down into, a card's worth of information about each one of those sites.
Wow, I'm so impressed. It's like a whole world, just I've not come across. When you're saying board games, I was like, is it Dungeons and Dragons or is it something, like that? But you've actually created your entire, I love that. That's creativity at its finest, right? Creating new ideas and things.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Okay, tell me a bit about Toastmasters.
Yes. So I have been a member of Toastmasters for about only officially about 6 years at this point. I went to my first meeting 18 years ago, but I was reluctant to join because I felt like, I'm pretty good at this public speaking thing, and what value is it going to drive for me? And then I realized it was a great venue to be able to, sharpen my skills, continue to learn new skills, and, build an additional kind of social structure there. So that's been a very fun diversion for me over the last, handful of years. And, what's interesting to me about that is as somebody who is a more seasoned speaker who's, not a stranger to speaking in front of a group of, 100, 1,000 people, or, a small group for a demo presentation of, 2 to 10, I have a lot of experience there that I get to share with others. So I see these people who are really working hard at being able to just stand up in front of a room and talk for 5 minutes, just them. And that's a really big deal. And, I can help be that audience, be that person of encouragement. And as they have questions, I can give good, focused feedback on what it is that they're doing. And for me, I often end up learning or remembering things that I hadn't even, thought about or I can refocus on. So I end up getting something out of it too.
Yeah. Man, that's incredible. Have you got a kind of a story that you could tell about somebody that, came in a shy, if you like, fearful state of public speaking, and a transformation journey? Can you kind of recall anyone to mind? You can use a fake name for them if necessary, but kind of, what you saw happen over that period of time?
Yeah, so I will use a pseudonym, but I will tell a story about Ari. And Ari, she came into Toastmasters. She was not native to the U.S., so there was a little bit of a language barrier to begin with. And then additionally, she was she was in a position where she was going to have to give a regular presentation to other people. And if she wanted to be able to advance in her career, she needed to develop that skill. She came to Toastmasters and, kind of got over that very first icebreaker speech is the very first one you give in Toastmasters. And it went pretty well for her. She was very anxious about it, but it went really well. A couple of speeches later, it was interesting because some of the feedback that we had gone through with her was around kind of the word choice, as well as her. She was often coming up with the right words, but she was very focused or very aware of the fact that it was taking her a moment or two to think of the right word, and she was trying to fill that in with other words, and it just became very distracted and very filled with too much information, or it took away from the overall message. And, kind of played that back, not in the full group feedback, but as kind of a private feedback, a little bit of, hey, notice that you were using, this phrase an awful lot, and kind of went through the steps of some ideas of how to change that, and just pause and be quiet and be confident in that. And I tell you, the last presentation that Ari gave, she gave one on artificial intelligence, of all things, and it was a really compelling story. And the way that she told it, and the way that she used kind of that silence as a tool for her was really fun for me to see.
Wow, that's so cool. That's so cool. This is the longest intro sequence I've ever had on a podcast. But you know what? I'm just going to run with it because I really want to get your ideas and thoughts before we get into pre-sales on mentoring. Tell me kind of, what you've done in this space and kind of what have you seen from a results perspective? Sure.
So couple of things on that. I mean, one, I believe in both kind of formal and informal mentoring relationships. So, there's certainly formal ones. There's one through my alma mater, the University of Minnesota, that I participate in each year. I get formally matched with a student, and we kind of go through a set rubric, and that's been very, very useful in my ability to hone and refine my mentoring skills. And I think, based on each student, they have their own different reasons for entering into it. But what's been more, interesting in the big picture for me is these less formal mentoring relationships that, maybe start out as something formal, but then it just becomes a regular conversation that I keep and have with people, and they'll come and ask questions, and we get to talk through things. And to me, I like helping to be that sounding board and listen to people and throw out ideas without telling people what to do, because a mentor shouldn't be telling you what to do. They should be, listening and helping you think and generate ideas. At least that's how I like to think of that. I have one person who, I didn't really think of it as a mentor situation, but he came up with the term friend-tor, so combining friend and mentor, which I thought that was a pretty fun term to have out there. So I like those types of mentorships as well. So have you done anything in the kind of your career space, as in around, business applications, anything like that in the kind of informal mentoring side of things? Yeah, I have. Well, so it started out as a formal one, but when I was in the partner channel, I had raised my hand as someone who wanted to help mentor folks on our pre-sales team. So it kind of started out there as like, yeah, I'll do this, but there was no structure that was, provided. There was no, guidance for what that even meant. So it became, a very informal check-in, looking at goal setting both within the specifics of that role, as well as just looking more broadly at life. Because if you don't have those things within your career that align to where you want to be in life, you're gonna find yourself in a really tough spot, or hit a crossroads where you're making these hard choices between career and passion. And if you can't align those, and you don't know even what you're thinking about to try to align those, it can cause frustration later on.
Yeah. It's definitely a hard line to walk, if you like. I was saying before that, I've been mentoring now for the last couple of months around 30 people around the world. And it's very hard to not, if you like, go too far over that line of getting into their life, as opposed to this is, my mentoring is all around Microsoft Business applications and your career and stuff around that space. But you can't help it. When engaging with people, right, you're touching life, and it's definitely, not a sharp line, if you like, to walk.
Yeah, and something that I do a lot in those types of situations is I will suggest kind of some activities to go through that focus on overall life and direction. And that part is done not like with me right there. I mean, I say, literally take this, find an hour, go do these things, write it down. Don't think you're going to have to share it with me. You're welcome to, but unless you've thought through these things, we're not going to be able to effectively look at what your milestones in your career are going to be, and help set the milestones of things that are going to happen in your life regardless of what action you take. Aging, family, kind of key milestones in your life of like when you're able to have children versus not have children, and those kind of things. Introduce these natural milestones, and you can align career to like, oh, I don't want to be in a role where I'm traveling all the time when I have kids that are between certain ages, but maybe when they get older, I'm okay with traveling more, and try to align those stages within career development to those things that are going to be important personally.
Yeah. Wow, this is so good. I mean, I definitely think I'll be having another conversation with you at a later date, because there's so much I'd love to drill into there. But let's talk a bit about pre-sales. So, one of the things the podcast focuses on is the Dynamics 365 practice, or really now with, let's say, the Power Apps practice or the business applications practice, a bit more broader. So you currently specialize in, pre-sales, or you got recommended from your broad pre-sales experience. And I understand you come from a bit of an architecture background, but can you explain kind of what pre-sales is as you see it? So not hypothetical, but as in tangible. What do you see it as?
Absolutely. So, I mean, at its core, pre-sales is a support role. So you're not the person out finding the deals, but you're really charged with helping to drive deals forward. And that can involve a lot of things, but it generally falls into a few categories for me. One of them is research. You got to know who it is that you're going to be selling to. And there's a lot of things that in pre-sales you're going to focus on that I'll call it the relationship person isn't necessarily going to focus on. There's presentation. And for me, this is, important of driving the overall message of the presentation toward some sort of goal that we're all going toward. And then part of those presentations will often include demonstration. So showing the actual software or how it would work, or slides, images, videos, whatever that combination of assets might be, in demonstrating how it's going to work.
Mm-hmm. So kind of, what do you love about it, and what kind of motivates you to work in the space?
So, I think what I really love about it is I love presenting, and it offers a lot of opportunity to be presenting. It also gives me an opportunity, or the excuse really, to explore the platform. So as somebody in pre-sales, I need to know where the application has been, where it is today, and where it's going, and how it fits in with so many other things. So, I'm business applications, but to do that effectively, I need to know, when are we looking at Azure? When are we looking at ISV solutions that will, augment the capability? When do we start having that conversation of building a Power App and driving that down to the kind of that citizen developer maker level versus when does that get brought into something that's more centralized? And, kind of having the excuse to look at all of that, I feel like I'm not limited.
So tell me about, let's say you're 2 weeks out and a salesperson or account manager comes to you and says, listen, I need you to do a presentation that will involve a demo on, let's say 2 to 3 weeks in the future. From that point of understanding, game time is happening at a certain point, what's your T-minus activities from that kind of live demo? What are the steps you'd go through to make sure that when you walked in that room, you're going to play the best game you can play?
Yeah. So the central thing, there's one common starting point that I have for every presentation that I'm going to go into, and that is knowing who is going to be in the room that I'm presenting to, whether it's a physical room or a virtual room, and why is it that those people are there? And both, why have we been told they're there, but also why do they think they're there, or why are they committing this time out of their life to be there? Because that central question and having a clear answer, or at least even if I don't have that specifically from the horse's mouth, so to speak, but if we have an agreed upon understanding of this is why we think they're actually here, that's going to drive a lot of the decisions around what are we going to put together as a message? What are we going to build from a demonstration standpoint? What are we going to show as far as off-the-shelf assets versus having to build custom? And it all goes back to that question of who is my audience? So from there, once I've identified that audience question, and it's rarely known to the degree that I actually want it to be, so it takes some further investigation, it's going to fall into one of a few different categories. One is that we're in a situation where it is highly structured. Think of that like an RFP type of situation where there's a specific set of agenda items or use cases that we've been tasked with going through. There's another path that we can go down where, we know there's a competitive nature to this. There are some known or pretty common industry use cases that we're going to go through. And then the third one is it could be very exploratory on their part. And depending on which of those categories things fall into, I'm going to take a different approach to each one of them.
Right. What else?
So if we look at that, we started at one point, we broke out into 3 potential paths. There are a few common milestones along each of those paths that will be there for me. One of them is making sure that we've identified the reason and the role for each person who's going to be part of the presentation. And making sure it's very easy, especially, we've all kind of seen, if we haven't participated in, probably heard about those meetings where we're backing up the bus with people to a meeting and, gosh, why are all these people here?
Are you talking about Microsoft demos?
Yeah, absolutely. Both.
Yeah, I've been there.
True, even before I was part of Microsoft. But, to me, if we can focus rather than trying to get coverage on every potential question or topic that could come up, let's be very specific about, okay, based on who we know is in the room, let's identify what the right set of people is going to be and the roles that are going to make sense to that audience in how we're going to present our message. From there, we can assign roles of who's going to control the action as we go through the overall presentation, who's going to be responsible for doing the different aspects of the demonstration, and that could be one or more demoers that do that activity. And then how are we going to engage with the audience, and who's going to be kind of championing that interaction with the audience as part of it, and understanding those roles and making sure that's clear is going to be an important checkpoint before we actually get to the final presentation flow. Because if we have those roles identified and we know these are the ones we need to have, we're not trying to, we can make a lot of decisions about what's important to the presentation and the script based on, this audience analysis and who is going to be best to deliver it. And it cuts out a lot of decisions along the way and a lot of wasted time. And there's nothing I hate worse than like bringing in 20 people to a phone call to try to go by committee of what this is going to be, because then you get, 185 slides and it's going to be a 6-hour presentation. Let's figure out what they're going to care about first. Be thoughtful with people's time of who we're inviting. Give them a reason why on our side of how we're presenting, why they're going to be there. And then they get it and they have like some excitement around it rather than, I guess I'm going to go in this meeting, but I don't know why I'm there, but I guess I'll just, sit in the back and check email.
Yeah. So you've mentioned role a few times there, and I just want to get a clarification. Are you talking about role as in title, or role as in they're a buying influencer or decision maker, or are you talking about, let's say, their demo persona, which might be that they really want a competitor's product in there, and they're in there to kind of lay some landmines for you, to catch you out, they don't want your technology, period. That's what I say. What role? Because I see them as quite distinct roles. And when you're going in, kind of, how much information do you have around those different role personas that an individual has outside of their, what's on their business card or LinkedIn profile?
Yeah. So to answer the one of the aspects of that, I want to know all of those things. The more I can know that person, what their background is, do I see that there's someone who's probably used their existing system a bunch? Are they someone who was probably involved in their previous decision around the platform they're using? Are they new to the organization? And, what do we know about where they just were and what it is that they might be familiar with or might be using? Those kind of things help identify how friendly somebody is going to be in the meeting. But then the other side of it is, we often, within a meeting where we're going to be doing a demonstration, there's typically a range of people. There will be some folks from IT. There will be some people from different lines of business within the organization. There will be some specialists that get thrown in there that have job titles that don't easily align to something that would be a common title. This is especially, as I've been more and more into healthcare, titles are so varied in what they actually mean. So there's some confirmation and understanding of the audience and working with, who has relationships with them and can help identify, even that type of role of what people have in the organization. So we can focus on where it fits, because, you look at a business application solution, and if we're looking at something that's going to be siloed to one and only one team, it's probably not the right deal to be looking at, or we should be helping to educate them on why they need to look beyond just their primary team with what they're going to do. It's the way the platform is designed, for one thing, and it's also just the nature of connectedness that we have in the business application space. If it's another silo, that's not going to be very exciting. They probably have silos. Why would they replace one silo with another?
Yeah. That's interesting. What do you do in the scenario where you walk into the meeting, you can see, predominantly everybody in there are going to be people that are not going to be working on the end product. So in other words, it's all a management type level decision, and you find there's nobody in their decision-making process that's actually the individuals and people that are going to work with the technology at the end game. Do you highlight as a risk, or how do you handle that?
So yeah, I would certainly highlight that as a risk, but there's also some opportunity there if we can make an assumption that, if we're talking with a management layer, and I'll assume for this case it's a middle management layer, they're pinched in the middle because they have a team below them that are actually going to use the system, and they're going to, if they make a decision for the Microsoft Business Application Platform Plus, they're going to have to be able to defend that situation. They're also in the middle where they're going to have to sell that the value of that up the chain to their leadership to be able to get funding. There's a lot of room for them to be nervous about making any decision. And often one of our biggest competitors in any deal isn't, the other, main business application platform, cloud-based business application platform out there, but it's really no decision because they are caught in the middle. So when you look at it through that perspective, there's this amount of empathy that you can have for the situation they're in because they want to make their team's lives better. They need to figure out how do we go and secure the funding that we need to be able to put that into place and put together a plan for how long it's going to take, what the milestones are going to be. And their expertise is not business applications. Their expertise is, hopefully managing their team or growing a revenue number or managing, customer satisfaction as part of it. Like, this isn't their day job. So we have a huge opportunity to help them. So the discussion and the presentation and the demonstration is more about kind of giving those vignettes of how it makes, obviously for the front lines, how it makes their lives easier. For that person in the middle, it focuses on how they can drive to what their key metrics that they're trying to drive to are, but also giving the ammunition to go to that leadership and get, secure the funding, the timeline, and so forth to be able to make this happen.
Yeah, no, that is so good. That's so good. There's so many more questions I want to drill into here, but just one last one on the pregame. Do you do any type of either phone calls and or kind of in-person interviews, if it's a high stakes scenario we're in, to get a real read for the individuals, or do you first eyeball them, when you walk into the room or get on a webinar or something like that?
So that's a fair question. So for me, I always want to have some sort of conversation or some sort of interaction with them beforehand. If I can get, even a half hour's worth of time and start to get a read of who it is that we're actually going to be in front of, that will be helpful. Depending on the size of the opportunity in the deal, there may be multiple, sessions of doing discovery that are involved in trying to do that, both on the customer side as well as seeking advice from other resources, either in Microsoft or with a partner organization that has worked with this customer before, to kind of have that picture of kind of who they are, what they care about, what they're doing, and in the context of whatever primary research I've been able to do, the least at very least, stuff through LinkedIn or press releases online. At best, face to face, having met with them. Depending on deal size, that's not always practical to do that. So you have these, kind of middle layers that are there.
Yeah, so true. This is great. Can you tell me about now, the rubber hits the road, the demoing part. Tell me about your demo strategy, which is naturally part of a wider presentation, but kind of what do you do to get your demos on point? Are they more generic, or are they, totally tailored to their scenario, or do you just go for an industry-based, so you're kind of like in the ballpark? Tell us about your, the demo part.
Yeah. So I have a confession to make. I'm guilty at spending way too much time personalizing demonstrations. I know it's actually a shortcoming that I have, because I end up spending too much time on that and burning midnight oil to do it. But, it really depends on the stage in the deal. Oftentimes there's this common perception that is very frustrating to me, that especially since I have, been graced with good feedback on my demos in the past, that like, oh yeah, if you just get in there, he'll do a great demo and, it'll move the deal forward. And you know what? The inverse of that is absolutely true. A bad demo can absolutely halt a deal. But I will say that even the very best demonstration does not have somebody signing a piece of paper at the end of that meeting. It doesn't work that way. And no matter how good and how tailored and how perfect that demonstration is, that is not the thing that is making them buy right then. It's a million little things that are going to happen along the way. Now, that being said,
it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, well, and there's an important thing to keep in mind, though, is that a lot of little tailoring things that you're doing within the course of a presentation and specifically a software demonstration can lead to how people perceive what you're presenting. That's true both in the language that you use. Is that, am I using the right industry language? Sometimes I make the comment, I don't really care what environment I'm demoing out of, but I need to know what term they put on these different things. To use a very generic term, do they actually call them opportunities or do they call them deals? And those types of things, yes, it can say opportunities at the top, but if I'm going through a demo the right way, I say, I wake up in the morning, I take a look here at the deals that I have that are at risk so I can make sure I take action on those today. And that puts somebody in the seat if the term deals makes sense to them. Now, I'm also focusing on, I'm not waking up and logging into a system to look at all my deals. I have ones that have been brought to me using some level of intelligence. That's just implied in that language of the deals that are at risk, the deals I have that are at risk. So, how did they get there? And these are all details that I can drill into as we get into more, detailed scenarios. But additionally, around the language side of it, using that language that kind of transfers them into the seat. I am doing this as though I am a member of their team. So it's not that you can do this or you can do that, but rather, as I, in this role, do this, I do this thing. And it's very funny. So I have a background in implementation and delivery, and the concept of how you do something like write a user story. Gosh, if I have well-formed user stories, those are perfect for me in setting up demo scenarios. As a fill in the blank for the role, I can blah, 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 so that blah, blah, blah. It fits very well, but it tailors that demo scenario. If you know what that general user story is going to be, you can turn it into a more compelling demo scenario.
Yeah, so true, so true. Can you give me an example of where you've walked out of the room feeling like a rock star?
So there was an opportunity I had. It was back in 2013, 14. Gosh, yeah, I think it was 2014. It was a very, very strategic deal that we were going after. We had an opportunity to present to, actually, of all things, it was a room full of that middle management layer. There were about 500 of these folks who were brought together for a sales conference for a few days in Vegas. And one of the things that they were going to do is they were going to get a demonstration of the Microsoft Dynamics business application platform, which, for an audience like that, especially in Vegas, they're probably not really looking forward to that session.
Yeah, exactly.
But we did there were a few things that we layered into that to make it engaging, to make it fun. One is actually on the know your audience side of it. I mingled at some of the prior events I was presenting on day 2. I did a lot of mingling and I tested out different, language, talking through the scenarios, getting feedback on where, these people as the managers saw their teams struggling, to be able to hear how do they actually talk about these things. So, weave some of that in. We also saw that they were using the product Sprinkler to monitor social engagement. They were trying to get people to use hashtags and tweet about different things throughout the various sessions. So we introduced a hashtag game as part of the presentation. So I wove that into the bottom of all my slides, had specific hashtags on there. And it was as people were seeing something that resonated with them or someone on their team, they tweet with that hashtag, with whatever it was. So we got to see real-time feedback. They actually had a screen off to the side that Sprinkler had put up, where it was showing, kind of that term trending up, and we could see kind of like what people were excited and how it was going to impact their team. And it was, 500 people, something like that. And, it was about a 45-minute to an hour session. I think I got about an hour and a half of sleep the night before with all the updates I made from what I learned. And, it's also Vegas, so that may have played a role.
As it would.
Boy, it was everything came together on that one. And while it wasn't signed that day, we did win the deal. So that was a blast.
Wow. Phenomenal. Listen, we're running out of time. I've got 12 more questions to go, and that's even before I get on to quickfire. So I'm going to sideline those 12 questions and get on to quickfire. And these quickfire are not necessarily about business dynamics, Microsoft, anything like that. So when I ask you about them, you don't have to give me answers, if you like, tailored to that industry, more about what you're into personally. So first of all, what books, blogs, podcasts do you recommend most to people, and why?
Absolutely. I'll start with books. The one that I recommend the most to people is just a fun fiction book. It's called Ender's Game. There's a movie made of that recently, or last handful of years. Just a fantastic, really fun science fiction story. The other one that I will comment on from a fiction standpoint is called The Name of the Wind.
The Name of the Wind?
The Name of the Wind. Yeah, it's by Patrick Rothfuss. And it's part of it, so it's a fantasy book, and it is the first in what will be a trilogy or more of books. You can think of it kind of like in the vein of a Lord of the Rings type of thing, but just the way he has constructed these different scenes and phrases and brought things together. It's the first time in a long time where I sat down, I knew an exciting chapter was coming up. I cleared everything off. I turned off my phone. I read that chapter. I put the book down, and I just sat there and thought about it. To anybody who's wondering what chapter that is, I won't spoil anything, but it is the pipes scene, trying to get the pipes. So for anybody who's curious and has read it or wants to read it.
Very good. I always use this as ideas to add to my book list. What's your favorite app and why? And I'm talking about mobile phone type app. If I was to look at your battery settings, which app would choose the most of your power?
Yeah, that would probably be Podcast Addict. It is a podcast app for Android. I listen to a heck of a lot of podcasts, and that has been my best one. Close second as far as top app would be one that I've used for about the last 4 months at this point, called Daylio, Daylio. And it is a mood and activity tracking app to be able to look at and try to correlate what are the things that you're doing and how does that impact the overall mood that you have. It's been a very, very good one for me. Very
interesting. I'll be checking them out. Tell me the best purchase under $100 you've ever made.
Best purchase under $100 that I've ever made.
Can't be food, can't be a bottle of wine, too generic.
So this one is definitely like a tech guy thing, but it's called the Hutu TripMate.
The Hutu TripMate.
And the specific model number is the TM05. And what this device is, I consider it to be something that anybody who does software demonstrations should have in their bag. So what it does at a high level is it's a device to be able to create your own personal wireless network, to be able to connect as many of your own devices that you want to at once, and they can all share a single internet connection. So if you're going to a customer site where you don't know what their network situation is going to be, you can have your own personally managed private network that you can use, and you can connect it to a wired connection that they give you, a wireless connection they give you, or even as a backup, a MiFi type of device. And that way you're not trying to fight whatever network restrictions they might have out there.
I know what you mean. Who do you recommend as a guest for the podcast in the future? This podcast.
So have you had Leah Bowling on before?
No.
Yeah, Leah was a partner in crime from a pre-sales perspective, and she's just all in all, awesome person. She has, if people listening have seen her, it's probably from the 50 Tips in 50 Minutes session at the CRM User Group Summit. I think she's done that maybe 7 years standing right now. So yeah, an ever popular one, but she's phenomenal.
Excellent. I'll get you to introduce me to her. Matthew, it's been awesome to have you on the podcast. Before we go, if people want to find you online and kind of follow what you're up to, where can they find you?
Absolutely. The easiest way is through my website, which is connectingthedata.com. You can also find me on Twitter at MC Anderson.
You've been listening to the Dynamics 365 show on the Business Application Podcast. Please consider subscribing to the podcast on any great podcast player. Your host was Business Applications MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 Guy. For full show notes or to discuss anything covered on this show, please go to nz365guy.com/66. Until next time.